Welcome back. We are with hopefully now a regular guest, Dr. Andy Martin. He's a professor or a lecturer. I always get this confused at Cambridge and French. And I want to talk, he has a wonderful British accent. What is it about, there's an intellectualism. If you speak with an English accent, we immediately feel inferior in the United States. Even the ambulances in London are like, or the police cars are like, boop, 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 boop. Excuse me, please get out of the way. Boop, 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 boop. You know, in New York, it's like, woot, 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 woot. We even have a police siren called the Rumbler. I don't know where I'm going with this.
Rob, I'm sorry to hear that, because I was hoping to go for the British villain kind of voice. As a matter of fact, actually, I wanted something kind of sinister and suspicious. But
in the United States, I have a theory that in the movies, anytime an actor plays a villain, they speak with a Southern accent. I've actually done an algorithm on this, and it's true. But so see, there actually is a sensible segue here. We're talking about villains, and
indeed,
you and I love to talk about crime fiction, and you were making a mention earlier in the,
and
in the
heroes.
green room about it. And
we love heroes too, to be fair. I mean, one thing that, in fact, listeners may like to know this, that Rob and I may be coming to blows, in fact, after this program finishes, because we each have our own heroes. Mine would be Jack Reacher, Lee Child's, and his would be Joe Pike, I think.
Yes.
Robert Crace's hero. And he feels that Joe Pike could take out Reacher, which is ridiculous, obviously. I feel people would be with me here. And the reason for, I just want to suggest why that is, actually.
Yes, tell me.
And that is because Joe Pike, in terms of fighting ability, I would put them on a par, but Reacher is sneakier than Pike. And so when Pike is walking out of the bar to have the fight outside, Reacher is going to bash him over the head with a pool cue.
So he'd sucker punch him, as we say.
Yeah, exactly. Before he even gets to the door. Pike isn't like that.
Well, a friend of mine who will be on the show eventually, Phillip Morton, who's a successful screenwriter in L.A., I turned him on to Lee 2 years ago, and he went to the library. I think he bought a few too, but he's read every book. A couple of them twice now. And so his big, beard stroking moment now is, I'm trying to decide if Reacher is a sadist. Any thoughts on that?
Well, there's one woman in particular who springs to my mind who says this is true, and she has read one of the books and has thrown it away in disgust. But there are, of course, many women readers of Lee Child and who are fans of Reacher and rather want to go to bed with him, if at all possible. I'll give you one example, actually, which is true, because I've been doing some research into the readers of Lee Child. I've studied his writing process. Now I'm looking into the reading side, and there's one in particular, wonderful woman who got in touch with me, who is in fact the widow of the great South African writer Andre Brink. Now, he died last year tragically, suddenly on a plane flight somewhere over Africa. She was distraught for the following 2 months. She then, I'm summarizing, by the way, and this is a very crude account, but nevertheless, she then discovered the works of Lee Child, became addicted. She now takes Jack Reacher to bed with her. So, literally. So, Jack Reacher took the place of her husband. And I feel that this may be true of many husbands around the land right now, that Jack Reacher is taking their place in many ways.
Well, it's funny. Okay, forgetting even Reacher and Pike, Robert Crace made a comment somewhere, I saw it in print. He said, all men want to be Joe Pike and all women want to sleep with him. And I mentioned this at a live symposium. So a woman raised her hand as if I'm at fault for this. She goes, well, I wouldn't sleep with Pike. And then another woman goes, well, I certainly would. And it started a little brouhaha in the audience. And it just, I've talked to John Land about this on the show. It's amazing how passionate people are about these books. And there's something still, and Nelson DeMille and I have discussed this, how intimate it is.
Talking of land, hold on. Caitlin Strong.
Yes.
I want to sleep with her. Let's be clear about this. The great thing is, of course, this is all safe sex, by the way, because they do not exist.
Yes.
But nevertheless, they do in our minds. And that is the beauty of it. But, I want to ask a question here. May I turn the tables, Rob? Can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
You've interviewed all these great authors over the ages, on your and I've loved listening to it, and that's partly why it's such a great pleasure for me to be here. But why is there so much crime, in quotation marks? Why is the noir novel now so huge in this country? At the same time, by the way, that crime, without the quotation marks, statistics are going down. The statistics for crime novels going way up. So we have a bit of a mystery here, do we not, about mysteries? And I wonder why that is.
It is a conundrum, and I wish Nelson was here right now, since he's a member of Mensa and has a vocabulary nearly as large as yours. But you could also interject with French comments too, so you're bilingual. It is. There was something I think that I read or heard somewhere, and of course now you've got me in an aha moment. I'm not sure. It is interesting. Nelson and I were talking about shows on television like not CSI, but the one where they have the FBI behavioral unit with Joe Mantegna. I'm having a senior moment, and there's some pretty gruesome serial killers on these shows. And there are books now about serial killers. Jonathan Kellerman had a big run with that, and Thomas Harris has with Dr. Hannibal Lecter. I think that they write charming villains a lot of the time.
Yeah, villainy. The experience that you've had there, very comparable to one I had myself recently when in Oslo, in Norway. And something similar in Stockholm, I think. The phenomenon which I'm sure your listeners rather will be acquainted with, is that of Nordic noir. There are so many novels coming out of Scandinavia now. This is not just American crime. This is a global thing. But Scandinavia is very big on crime, as you will know. Joe Nesbo, for example, in Norway. But I had a conversation with David Lagerkrantz in Stockholm, the author of The Girl in the Spider's Web, who has picked up the Stieg Larsson franchise, the follow-on from the Millennium Trilogy. And it was absolutely fascinating, I must say. And I think it struck me then that all of these... I was in this wonderful establishment in Oslo called Litteraturhut, which is where a lot of writers were hanging out, inventing crimes, inventing murders. And so it struck me then that what we are doing, as you say, there's so many maniac serial killers on the rampage on TV, we are, as it were, we are making sacrifices at some level to the gods.
Was that place Literature in the Hood there? Did I translate that properly?
I was trying to give it a Norwegian accent. I've got to admit, I've got about 2 words of Norwegian. Okay, but the Literature House, where this friend of mine, Ben McPherson, a young writer, has written this wonderful book, Line of Blood. I mention him because, fun enough, he used to be a student of mine way back in Cambridge, now novelist, living in Oslo. And can I give a specific example of something that took place? He was there. Listeners will recall the terrible massacre wreaked by one Anders Breivik in Oslo some years ago, 2011, I think it was, where he went on the rampage, killed 70-odd young people on the island of Utøya, as well as setting off a bomb in the middle of Oslo. He is, I believe, the most successful solo mass killer in history hitherto. And my younger friend, Ben McPherson, ex-student, is writing a book which is influenced by that, in which he revisits a massacre. Fun enough, that book, which he's working on right now, is called This Is Not America. The irony being that a family from America goes to Norway, that I'm not giving away the plot because this is the premise of the thing, goes to Norway in search of a low crime society.
And something terrible happens.
One of the daughter is involved in a massacre, is killed, and they then seek either justice or revenge, and that's the fascinating. But so what is he doing? And he said to me when I was talking to him, okay, so like many writers, like Lee Child, like Robert Crace, what am I doing when I'm killing off someone in my book? And it struck me, actually, particularly when I was observing Lee Child at work. And may I say, he said that I had one insight in my book about Reacher said nothing. And that was that he is not only Jack Reacher, which is the first thing we think of, he is also all the bad guys he ever dreamed up. And this struck him and rather worried him, because it means that he is involved in all the evil schemes which he is describing. And it struck me with Ben McPherson that he is, in writing about a massacre, is writing about it in order to prevent something like that happening again. And there is a wonderful, can I give you this wonderful word, which Nelson DeMille, no doubt, is well acquainted with, and it is apotropaic. It's a great old word, and it means something to do with warding off evil. So I feel that all these books, these crime books that we read with such pleasure, the mysteries which we have solved for us, are there in order to attempt to ward off.
Yes,
evil.
and as you mentioned, there are unfortunately no real Reachers and Pikes, maybe somewhere, and we wish that there would be. That's why we like Clint Eastwood movies so much. And you want to have this hero that's going to do something and protect you and save us. But the tables have been turned. You made me think back to the day when you had the Cagney movies and he played bad guys, and you had real life bad guys like John Dillinger, who were public heroes because people were hungry and starving, or Jesse James. Mel Brooks said he didn't steal from the rich and gave to the poor. He stole from everybody and kept it for himself. That's what he said about Robin Hood. There was an attraction to the bad guy, and there always has been, but now we're focusing more on the more horrific bad guys, and because they exist, and these authors are giving us a hero that's going to make everything okay.
A kind of achieving a sort of cosmic balance. I mean, I was thinking partly while I was in Norway, I must admit, spring in Norway, fabulous. The days are getting longer and so on, because you have these long periods of darkness. And someone mentioned the light and the dark in books. And it struck me, in a symbolic kind of a way. But it struck me that it isn't just symbolic, because if you sort of try to wind the clock back in your own head and you ask yourself what is... In fact, it's become inscribed in philosophy as a fundamental philosophical question. How do we know the sun is going to rise tomorrow? It's a philosophical conundrum, but the simple answer to that is, actually, we don't. We kind of sort of believe it probably will, and we're almost certainly right. But there's a little crack of uncertainty, and when specifically you ask yourself, okay, will I rise tomorrow? Well, maybe you will, maybe you won't. But hopefully, yeah, but you could get bowled over by a bus, walking out the door. You never quite know. And it is in that sort of uncertainty when you're waiting for the light to reappear, that let there be light moment, that it's in that little crack of uncertainty, of darkness, really, that all fiction and faith also belongs.
Oh, I'm going to give you, as we wrap up, some information I got from Andrew Vax. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
No, I don't.
He writes some very dark books. He's had an interesting background. He's an attorney. He was a prison warden, and he writes about serial killers and sociopaths and bad people. So this is his theory, that there are loads and loads of sociopaths in existence, and some of them are serial killers, but a lot of them have regular jobs, and unfortunately some of us are married to them, or they're our doctor or lawyer or boss, and that's why people find this so compelling, because they see something in these villains who are sociopaths, that it's not like the only sociopaths that exist are not just serial killers or bad people. They're also some of them, according to Vax, are successful because they really don't have feelings one way or another about anything. So they can say things to people like, "You're fired." Not that I'm saying Donald Trump is. We're not political on this show.
You're right that there is the potential for being a maniac in all of us, I think, actually, and we neglect that at our peril. We're all potential sociopaths. And I think including writers, possibly above all writers.
Yes, because they're alone in a room all the time, and they don't interact with anybody, and they just talk to themselves.
And the good thing is that they are writers, because if you let them loose on the world, who knows what they would do. And it occurred to me one reason why crime is so successful, that crime novels are so successful, that it's possible that people who would otherwise become criminals have realized there's more money to be made out of writing crime novels, and they've taken up writing instead.
Well, that really sums it up, and I'm going to give you a brief plug before we sign off. Andy Martin is a native of Britain, where he lectures at the University of Cambridge for the Department of French. He's the author of Waiting for Bardot, The Boxer and the Goalkeeper, Walking on Water, is that about Jesus? The Knowledge of Ignorance, Stealing the Wave, Napoleon the Novelist, and, of course, Reacher Said Nothing. So Google Andy Martin and order some of those books so he can fly back here soon. Thanks for joining us, Andy.
Thank you, Rob.